We can. I have, the only ones I see missing off the team are Jennifer and Julie at this point in time.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Who is this?
It's Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer. Are you the 333 or the 33 person?
Yeah, can you see me?
No, we cannot see you.
Oh, okay. Well, my video is on, so, okay.
That's okay.
What's going on?
So I think, Steve, the only one we're missing is Julie at this point.
Julie, okay, good. We're going back to an agenda we effectively had scheduled for last week, which was postponed, obviously, because of Mother Nature. And so, Mayor Cole, I know that you had asked to introduce a document around a policy, and with your agenda item, I think this is a good chance for you to maybe just kind of give us a catch-up overview.
Yep.
I don't know if you care to say any comments about the council meeting on Monday night where the quarterly update was reviewed, and then address that policy. I would appreciate it.
Yeah, real quick. Thanks, Steve, and members of the committee. Thanks for just a few minutes here. I'm actually going to introduce, and then I'm going to let our city attorney, Darren Coker, kind of highlight that code of conduct policy. I want to start off by thanking Steve and the members of the committee for Monday night. We took in the first recommendations that you guys took to us. So we were able to incorporate that into the quarterly utility billing update that staff did. Had a good update, good dialogue, good questions. Asked Steve to give some thoughts on the committee, the work that you guys have been doing. Steve fielded a few questions, so I think it was a good time. It was obviously a good representation of what the committee work has been doing. And I again want to thank the committee for the work that you guys have been doing. It's yeoman's work, and it's and you guys are digging into it, and I appreciate that. Before Darren introduces this is actually a point that boards and commissions, and I get in this of the city fall under this code of conduct, is delineating how people who are representing a group within the city just conduct themselves, not only in the committee meetings themselves, but also outside. And in some ways, you guys are a representation of the city if you're speaking in any shape, form, or fashion as part of the committee. And then you certainly have your own personal opinions and beliefs, and it kind of this policy kind of talks about that. So with that, I'm going to let Darren talk about that. And just this is something that we should have given in our first initial meeting, just so you had it. And that oversight, I'll take the blame for that, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mayor and committee members. I appreciate the time and respect your time as well. And so I feel it's always awkward when you go over a policy like this, simply because y'all, as you know, you're respected members of the community, and that's why you were selected to be on this committee, because each of you have something to bring to the table. And so whenever you're having to go over a policy like this, these are the things that you already do, and it's sort of a common sense approach to things. And so anyway, I will walk through that. And if you don't mind, John, I think I'm going to go ahead and I don't think you have that as part of the packet, do you? Okay, well,
but we can share it now.
Well, okay, I'm going to go ahead and share that, my screen, if I can track that down. Let me see. This is it. Let me try that again. Okay. bear with me here. I seem to have lost my screen.
It's on ours, Darren.
Okay, you can see it.
It just went away.
Okay.
There it is. Okay.
Y'all can see it. Only I can't. So that's good. Let's try this. All right, y'all can see it now. Okay. All right. This is Cole. You can see that.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. All right. This was adopted by the City Council. As you can see, this was done in 16th day of December 2019. And as the mayor sort of already iterated, is that this was done to sort of just provide sort of an expectation for individuals who do get appointed to a board, a committee, a commission that's representing the city in some capacity, to sort of just give some guiding principles. And so I'm just going to walk through those, and then after I do that, again, I won't belabor it because I know y'all got some very important matters to discuss as part of this meeting. But after I do this brief review, then if anybody has any questions, obviously I'll open it up and individuals can ask questions. So it was really broken down into sort of 5 tenets. The first one that they broke down was integrity and honesty. And again, as I said, y'all are respected members of the community, but they just encourage people who are on boards and commissions to make sure you're relying on accurate evidence and statements as you go through the decision process, and that the decisions you make are in the best interest of the city and the constituents of the city. And ultimately, I think probably the key thing in this is that the way you maintain that integrity and honesty is, of course, make sure you don't engage in activities that would at least create an appearance of compromising your objectivity or your independence in that process. And so that was sort of the first in it. The next one was confidentiality. Obviously, with a committee like this, especially with a committee like this, the information that is going to be shared sometimes will be confidential, and information that's not intended for public consumption. And so it's just asking individuals that when that type of information is shared, that you respect that confidentiality and that you don't share that publicly. The third tenet would be fairness and accountability. Just asking the boards that when you conduct business that you obviously make decisions based on the merits of the issue, that you treat all persons equitably, and then finally that you conduct a business in a way that exemplifies transparency and open communication. And I think that's been obviously been exemplified with this board, or with the committee, just in the way you do business, and making sure that all the information is available to the public for public consumption. So. And then the fourth tenet would be respect. And this is just, again, it's a common sense approach that when you're working together to try to accomplish something, that you just respect everybody involved in the process, whether it be the city council, whether it be the staff, your fellow committee members, and then, of course, ultimately the public that we're all serving. So, again, respect being the fourth key element. And then the last part of that was committing to consistent attendance at the meetings, and obviously respecting the time and commitment that's required whenever somebody's appointed to serve on a board or commission or a committee. All right, and then the fifth tenet here is just communication. And this was the one that I was probably the most careful when we were discussing this with council, because we need to, when you're talking about communication, you need to respect people's right to communicate. And so this was crafted in that manner, and I'll just briefly go through that. And that's starting off is that to commit to a respectful, mutually rewarding, and direct relationship with the community. Refrain from conduct that interferes with city operations. Refrain from sharing electronic posts or city that include city-related confidential or privileged information. Limit it to the use of accurate information, that at least to the best of your knowledge, when you're electronically posting information that is city related. And then this is probably what I consider one of the more important ones, E. When you're expressing personal opinions or positions outside of the board or commission meetings, members should explicitly clarify that you're representing your personal opinion and not that of the group that you may be serving on. Again, this is not intended to keep people from sharing opinions outside. It's just to make sure that there's a clarification so that there's no unintended consequence of maybe that people would take your positions to be representing a larger group of people. And then finally, understand that electronic posting or deleting content, this one wouldn't apply to this board as much as it would to some other boards because this is a purely advisory board. But, and this is something we touched on in your initial meeting with respect to public information and whether or not certain communications would be considered public. So that just is a quick rundown. Miracle, I'm going to pass that back to you. And then obviously, if anybody has any questions, be happy to answer those.
Yeah, and thanks, Darren, because there was a couple of questions that had come up both internally with a member of this group as well as with staff and a council member or two that actually brought this back up. And again, we failed to share this up front. For example, one of the questions from a member within the committee here, it was around confidential information. If you had confidential information, like you guys may actually study a particular account holder's case, their consumption and those types of things, and those are things that are confidential, and we've got to make sure that how you handle that and does that get put out to the public and those types of things. Can you even see confidential information because it's confidential from that account person, but as a member of this committee you can. So wanted to make sure that we went through that and understood that you can do that. So with that, I want to make sure questions or a comment we can address, and myself or Darren to make sure that that you have this. At the end of the day, it's just a code of conduct to make sure that we're all handling ourselves in a professional manner. Nobody has done anything that warrants any issue against this particular code of conduct. Just want to make sure that you had it.
I do have a question on the confidentiality portion. Will you guys relay to us whenever we're given confidential information? What we may think is confidential may not be. What we don't think, what you think should be confidential. Obviously, we don't have executive session or a closed session, so right. We don't have that issue. I just want to make sure that we know what's confidential. I don't mind that it's there. I just want to make sure we know what it is.
And that's a great point, Mr. O'Day, and that's one of the things I've discussed with John and as we initiated this, the committee and y'all embarked on your work here, is that there will be times that, obviously, and we are recording these meetings for public consumption. And so told them that we have to be extremely careful and communicate to the board, the committee members when confidential information that cannot be disclosed is provided to y'all. For instance, if you're evaluating information, it may have specific account information, consumption data, things of that nature that would not ordinarily be available to the public, that those are things that should not be shared on a screen or reference to specifically so that the public would be able to identify confidential information. And the key there is that it needs to be communicated to the committee members when information is confidential so that you know whether or not it is something you can disclose. And so thank you for bringing up that point.
Yeah, or the fact that if it's personal information like that, we don't really care who the account holder is. If that information can just be removed from the document and said, this is what's been removed. I mean, obviously that I don't care who it is. I just want to look at the numbers that are below it.
Correct.
Darren, how you doing? Hope you're well.
Doing well. Thank you very much.
Semantics question, maybe, but I think it's a rather important one. I don't see in this document where we're not on a board or a commission. we're on a committee, so I'm trying to understand how this document pertains to what we're doing. I don't disagree with the principles involved here, but I'm trying to find a connection.
Okay, no, that's a good question. Boards and commissions, traditionally the city hasn't really had committees, and these are the idea here was that this was for as you can see here in the beginning, it says it applies to volunteer citizens who are representing the public on behalf of the city. And so I think it's synonymous with that. The fact of the matter is there's no penalty attached to this. And so I think, again, it was intended at the time it was adopted in 2019 to be a guide, just so that as anybody who works or does anything, whether it's in the workplace, you always like to know what the expectations are. And so that was sort of the intent of this, is so that when somebody does come and is working on behalf of the city for the public, even as volunteers, that we just have that expectation. Boards, the committee is a board of sorts. In this particular case, we call it an ad hoc committee. It was the intent, I believe, of the council to apply to all appointments of that nature.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification.
Sure.
So I guess I'll give my 2 cents worth. When I read this, I thought I needed to write up my resignation. Actually shared that with Steve, that said, I think I got to leave because I'm pretty outspoken in our community. I try to stay engaged, and unfortunately that started with the water billing last year, and it just kind of melded over to the budget and elections and everything else. So I stand in respect of what's going on inside this committee, and that's where I believe my code of conduct just personally applies in this. But I do think that 5E could tread on my freedom of speech, right? Because if I don't explicitly define, isn't it 5? Yes, explicitly define it as my personal opinion, I don't know what those consequences look like. And so I think that I'm willing to tender my resignation if that causes any heartburn. I'm not real good about being disciplined. And so that might not look real pretty if we think we want to do that one. So I really am struggling with this, Darren. I'm truly struggling with it. And I had a long conversation with Steve about it because it's just bred into my DNA to stand on my rights. And so I don't want to be overly passionate, but I also don't want to be tread upon. And so I don't know if I have to start every conversation with, in my opinion, or, hypothetically speaking, right? I don't know how to keep myself out of Dutch, maybe is what I'm trying to say. So I will do my best. I will do my very best. Feel free to offer constructive criticism if you think that I possibly step out of line. But I am prepared to tender my resignation if we come to that bridge. So I just wanted to say that.
Well, I appreciate your comments, and I don't take those lightly for sure, because I completely agree. You have a First Amendment right to share your opinions, and I've spoken with you a couple of times now, and I think you're passionate, but I've never heard you cross the line, from my opinion, in my communications, and so I appreciate your passion about the items that you are passionate about. In this case, it's utility billing, and that's one of the reasons why you were, I believe, that the council selected you to be on this committee, because of your passion and your involvement, and also what you bring to the table, but just from your professional background. So I appreciate that, and I thank you for sharing it.
Well, thank you.
I'll take next. It's in the UBCC box the committee has, but I want to point out an email that I received from our mayor states that my actions on social media are of concern to many council members. I believe I mentioned that to you. I've shared with you that I want you on this committee and that I need you to reduce the rhetoric. You gave me your word you would do so. I'm holding you to your word. That paragraph in that email from our mayor on February 14th at 12:08 p.m. to me is saying, I want you on the committee, but you have to shut up. Reduce the rhetoric. Now, that's important, I feel, and this came up. There's another email. I asked him, what brought this on? Why now? Well, it's because of me and a February 8th post that I made after a city council meeting. The post read, City of Pearland paid Raftellus to review meter to cash. One of Raftellus' points was the city took on a lot of projects at one time, and that was contributing to the problems. City council members Orlando, Hernandez, Kim, and Perez voted to add a major asset management integration project onto staff when they're trying to implement AMI and still trying to work out billing issues with New World. That was the entire post. That was the source of this. It's me. The next day, I received a call from our mayor that my post, in quote, ruffled some feathers, end quote. The next day, I received a call that there were 4 councilmen who want me off the committee. I ain't gonna speculate on who they are, it doesn't matter. I posted that on my personal wall. I didn't share it in the water billing discussion group. I didn't link it to the committee. It has nothing to do with water billing. It's an asset management. At this point, and that paragraph from the mayor, reduce the rhetoric, to me, makes me ask, is my being placed on this committee an attempt to muzzle me, to silence a critic? From my opinion, it is. And I feel very used by our elected officials. There's a city councilman who's up. I think this can also be used by them to silence me as a critic and a supporter of any potential opponent. With this code of conduct, if Jimmy Davis, as Jimmy Davis, resident of Pearland, does not believe that this councilman is representing us properly, these are the reasons why I believe this candidate would be a better representative of the people. I believe this code of conduct, that councilman can say, I feel that that's very disrespectful and Jimmy has violated his code of conduct. So this code of conduct can actually become a political tool used to suppress dissent and to help in their bid to be reelected. The Olson and Olson report stated there is a culture of shut up and do as you're told. Raftell's report highlights the need to have people be able to share honest feedback, criticism, and ideas. Yet here we are, City of Pearland elected officials are saying, my opinion, shut up and don't say anything about us that we don't like. And if you think we made a bad decision, don't say so. Just shut up and smile. If you don't, we're going to remove you from a group to solve a debacle that many current elected officials and senior staff leadership had a hand in creating. And I want it to be made public record day that if the city does seek to have my placement on this committee revoked, whether it's city staff or council wants to add it to an agenda, since council's the one that would do that, I would request advance notification of it, and I'm waiving confidentiality concerns. And I request all conversations and vote to be held in public session, not executive session. I don't feel that my post said anything disrespectful. I share public comments that anyone can read the Raftell's report. I told the public how 4 members voted. It's public record. And yet that is the source. That's what prompted this. And I have been told, reduce the rhetoric. That is considered rhetoric. You're trying to shut me up. And, well, Jimmy Davis doesn't take that too lightly.
So, Jimmy, do we have the opportunity to rebut that? So, Jimmy Davis.
I will, of course, try to be respectful of others, and I'll make sure when I post, I will try to make sure that I post, this is me as a resident, not a member of the committee.
So Jimmy, can
try to be mindful of that.
Yep. So Jimmy, let me respond to that, because while you have the right to your opinion, and I respect your right to your opinion, I also told you in a conversation that I want you on this committee. I want you to remain on this committee. I also brought that to you because one thing that I am is I'm honest and transparent with the information that people are sharing and are wanting me to share that information. Okay. I could have kept 100% of it back here and not said a word. Instead, I want to be honest and transparent with you. Secondly, I do not think, and I don't believe I represented anywhere in this, in my conversations with you, that your post or anything else, in my opinion, raised to the level of anything that violated this. I simply told you there were people who ruffled their feathers. Members of council can have their feathers ruffled. You are members of the public. You elect them. You elect me. Things can be said that ruffle our feathers. I'm simply telling you the truth of what they said. That doesn't mean that it rose to the level of anything on here. I also told you that you have a right to your opinion. Sometimes you can write things in social media in such a way to express your opinion without, ruffling feathers. I didn't use that term specifically. I think I said you can do it in a respectful way and still get your opinions across. So I want to make sure that yes, I was asked, was this policy given to this group? The answer was no. In hindsight, it should have been. So members of this committee know the rules, know the policies, know the code of conduct that any other group appointed by city council have up front. And for that, I stand responsible for making sure that was a part of your onboarding to this group. So, and again, I don't think anyone, and I said it in my opening comments, I don't believe anybody has done anything that warrants any issues with this policy to date. But I also want to make sure that the expectation level is there. So I want to make sure that is clear and abundant. And no, I don't believe Mr. Davis or anybody else on this committee is being silenced or wants to be silenced. Do members of council, do members of staff, do me as your mayor, do members of this committee want to make sure that every person on this committee is conducting themselves in a professional manner? Sure, absolutely. And I want to make sure that you're all aware and you see this and we don't have any issues. So, and again, we have an election coming up and each member of this committee has a right to go and do and vote and support and put a sign up or not or whatever. You have that right, as do I. And so I want to make sure that is out there for people to have as well. So with that, I'll turn it back over if there's any other questions to Darren or myself.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or statements? Well, hearing none, if we could move to item 1, the approval of the February 9th meeting minutes. Steve, if you'd like to lead that.
Sure, I'll seek a motion for approval of the reference minutes. Anyone?
I'll second.
Ralph moved and Denise seconded. Any discussion on the minutes? Any review or changes that might be required? All right, hearing none, let's move it to a vote. All in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. Hearing none opposed, the minutes from February 9th are approved. Mayor Cole, is there anything else other than this policy that you wanted to make mention of?
Nope, we're good. Appreciate that. Yep.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Moving to item 3 on the agenda, which 3A specifically, 3A are the recommendations that the committee has already voted on. I have one question on that item, Mayor Cole. It was not clear to me in listening to the council discussion on Monday night if council was presented with or given in their package the supplemental comments that the committee had summarized in addition to the vote. So I just wanted to clarify that question.
It is my understanding that, yes, that was sent to council. If it wasn't in the packet, it was sent to council prior to it.
The Word document, Mr. Sable, that you sent over to the mayor was attached to that first agenda item. So it was in the packet.
Right.
Great. I just wanted to confirm that, and I appreciate it. For the benefit of the committee, there were some consistencies in comments made by council members with regard to some of the areas of additional concern or additional consideration that the committee made mention of. That I inferred from that council had in fact read that document or had the opportunity to do so, and that we've got some alignment there. There were some elements of our preparation that were missing from council comments, and I highlighted those, and I'd be happy to email out to the committee kind of a summary of my comments because I did it from notes. It's on the record as well, and one of those was recognition that a major issue that this committee is working towards resolution on is raising the awareness of the high consumption accounts, and that issue should be included in many of the metrics and discussions that council had with staff on this topic. So, I mean, specifically, Ralph, I mentioned that for your benefit because I know that's been pervasive in your comments, and I think it's important that we keep that front and center with City Council as we go forward.
Yeah, so I just could clarify for my own understanding just a second. So the concern was what was the additional action items that we thought other than the Raftillus was? And in particular, did the council think that they still want us to evaluate this high usage concern?
Yeah, I think my comments, and one of the reasons that I included that in my comments was because I didn't hear much conversation by council members about that topic, and I wanted to keep it front and center in their thinking as they heard reviews from staff on a quarterly basis.
Okay, yeah, because that's really the issue that we're having to fight. So, and when we get to that point, hopefully we'll do this in the next week or two. I've been doing some research and I can explain things which I think will clarify a lot for everybody. So we'll deal with that when we get to it.
Yeah, and Steve, let me inject this at this point based on that question. I certainly am expecting and hoping and wanting you to dive into anything other than the Raftillus report, which is why I made it abundantly clear in your charter. I don't know if the charter is on the agenda here. I think it is. That item 4, anything outside of the Raftillus report around process, infrastructure, anything of that matter, the group, it's fair game. And so I certainly want to make sure that you guys are aware that it needs to be and it should be. Certainly, if it's a problem and we uncover it, then we've uncovered a problem. If we believe it's a problem and we look at it and then we find out that it's good, then we've solidified it. So one way or the other, we need to look at it. And I look forward to, Ralph, your uncovering of things and see where that goes.
All right. Other than that, I think that puts item 3A on our agenda in the record. My recommendation, consistent with what we were attempting to do our prior meeting and in the postponed meeting, was to move down to item 4B and to discuss the 3230 plan. And I raised that because it's sequential in this agenda. But we had hoped to hear from Mr. McCarter on kind of an overview of the financial considerations that are tied to the gap slash the arrearage. And John, I don't know if you're prepared to do that at this meeting or not, but if you kind of give us a status report on that. I know we had received a communication saying prior to the meeting on the 9th that you were not yet prepared for that.
Yes, sir. We're not yet prepared still. We had some interruptions, not just last week, but the prior week as well. So, but a quick status on where we're at. So we heard all the good feedback we got. I guess it's now 2 meetings ago on the 3230 plan. So we have worked with our internal financial analysts and programming specialists to do a script to calculate the actual arrearage based on a text file from the reads themselves, so the real arrearage. So that's a good thing. We're vetting through that data right now. I actually just got the second draft earlier today, so we're just making sure that that data is validated and makes sense and is ready to be shared with you all. We use the same data set to basically calculate the difference between that arrearage and what the kind of alternative plan that you all put forward, where we were looking at all charges above base charged at that lowest tier. So we can talk in tangible terms about what that financial data looks like. Where we're at now is putting that all together in a memo, along with a write-up on the accrual, which we talked about is very important when we talk about revenue to the city. So we have a write-up on the how and why on the accrual that we've run by our auditors that is done. But we need to do a projected accrual. So now we basically say, okay, if this committee chooses to take another path other than 3230 as of a specific date, what does that look like? So that's just doing that based on some average billing. So it's pretty involved stuff, but I'm optimistic that probably we'll have a solid draft of it before I leave tomorrow, and that someone who's sitting in my chair next will be able to carry that forward probably next week and get that to you all for you to start reviewing. So lots of work amidst lots of craziness, but we're close.
Great, thank you for that update. Appreciate that. Do you have a sense maybe of when staff or your replacement might be ready so that we can consider it, make time for it on the agenda? Are we talking 2 weeks, maybe briefer than that, or you really don't know based on, because I'm not sure if a replacement's been named for you at this point or not.
Yeah, we'll have a solid draft tomorrow ready for review. We got to get that out to the manager's office and a few other folks. So 2 weeks is probably as long as it would take. I would expect it would be with you guys shorter than 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you. Other committee members have any questions on that topic? I think one thing I want to add is that, again, based on curiosity and questions that came from council, the assessment of what the gap is, what the arrearage is, how it applies to financial aspects of this analysis, whether it be budget related or cash related, remains front and center. It's an active and open question. I think that as a committee demands that we find some way to clarify it better on behalf of the citizenry. And I appreciate hearing that you're making progress and acknowledge that it is quite complex. Any committee members have questions or comments on 3230 before we kind of table this for a future meeting?
I have a quick question. So are those financial numbers changing monthly or daily? Are we chasing a moving target?
We are, but we're just going to do it as of a certain set of reads in February. So we kind of drew a line, and that's what we're going to talk about. And then we can update that as we go along, but they are changing. Every time we do a new cycle, it changes. But we'll kind of draw a line, and that's outlined in the assumption, so you all know what we're talking about. But yeah, that's kind of the nature of it.
Mr. McCarter, can you share what read dates y'all are using? I'm assuming at this point that it's January and February, but
yeah, I think the oldest read date is the last read date in January, and it's the end of January, beginning of February. They were the most recent ones when we started the analysis.
Okay, so y'all are doing your analysis with 1 month of data.
Well, we're doing our analysis with the unbilled data at that point in time. So it's taken a shot in time, and then what was unbilled at that juncture. We're just trying to figure out what that gap is between the bill date and the read date at that point in time. So it would be 60 days, so two reads per cycle, I believe it is.
Okay, because I just got my bill, and I want to make sure the bill that I pay on March 8th that was sent February 12th and uncycle 12 was for meter read date, end date of 12/17. So it would be basically all the January and February reads.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah.
All right.
I have a question, maybe a couple. On the 9th, we talked about if I'll use you, John. Sorry, you're out tomorrow. It doesn't matter anyways how many times you get run over by a bus today, does it? We talked about it, and you said that you were in agreement with the methodology that Rough Tellis used to determine the gap. And so are we going to use that same methodology?
No, we're using the actual meter rates. I understand the methodology that Raftel has put forward, and I conceptually get it. But we feel like this is more accurate on a few fronts. One, we're using actual data. Two, in the Raftel's report, they used at the account level. We're going to the actual meter level, so we're getting meter by meter information instead. We have shared some of the estimates before based on historical usage, and we just felt like we have the files here. It's a lot of work, but people smarter than me did the scripting work to actually do the tiered calculations with the actual data, so we can talk about what's actual right now.
Okay.
Just John,
that seems to. I'm sorry, Ralph. Go ahead.
Yeah, John. I just wanted, before you leave out, because the meeting before last, when you presented the usage data historical for the 2 months that y'all looked at, I've just given you a future data need. We don't have it right now, but we're going to be wanting to look at usage looking back for some period of time. So when you talk with your scripting guys as you do your exit interview, please kind of relate to them a little bit what is coming, so that they can start thinking about how to prepare.
Yep, absolutely. That's on our list, and absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So just as a follow-up, Seth, I think you're on the line. We had on the 9th asked you if you could develop a cost estimate to calculate the gap. And I didn't know where you stood on that, and do we need to continue with that?
Well, we have developed, and that was part of the report, a cost estimate on the gap. I thought we had left it that we were going to review the methodology that John and company were using with the city. Was that your understanding, John?
That was my understanding as well, yeah.
Thank you.
there are no additional questions or comments on this topic, let's acknowledge that with that data, we'll be able to complete or at least really commence the conversation around 3230, have a conversation about the pros and cons in comparison to other potential resolutions of the gap or arrearage, and it's likely we'll begin those conversations in a week or so. I would suggest that we move down to item 5, with 5, which is additional recommendations pertaining to the AMI project, and we were going to hear from staff at an overview level the scope and timing of that project.
So I'll do a brief intro, and then I think we have Robert Upton on the line. But joining us today is Robert Upton. He's our Director of Capital Projects and Engineering. In addition to just being a smart guy, he is in charge of the AMI project. He's been the primary lead on that mammoth ordeal and undertaking since I believe its inception. So he's led the way there along with his staff. So Robert, if you could take it away and give a brief overview, I'd be appreciative.
Hold on. As soon as I find my unmute button, I apologize for that, committee members. What I need to have is if Nancy, if you don't mind, stop sharing and I can grab the screen, please. It would be greatly appreciative. Okay, I believe everybody can see that screen. Is that correct? Nods will work. Nods will work great. It's totally different these days. You look at one screen and your presentation's on another screen, and I have no idea what you're doing. And I work so hard to read what body language and what people say when I start speaking, so I can then get to the right point of what you're looking for. If you're falling asleep, then I know I need to speed up. So with that, Mr. McCarter's correct. I've been with this program for quite a while, starting back when being hired by the city in 2016, taking this project and working with Public Works at that time in 2017 when we were having this project associated with the surface water treatment plant. So today I'm just going to give you a high-level overview, answer what questions I can, if you have any. And then from that standpoint, if I need to get any further, more clarifying answers to your questions, I will get that information taken care of. Maybe. So let's give a little bit of history, and I want to take a history all the way back with regards to our current meters and then off to the AMI system, which includes what they call smart meters or ultrasonic meters and a read system. So our last meter change out happened in 2003, and that's when we converted over to what is called a Neptune mechanical meter and drive-by system. So there was also endpoints in the drive-by system at that time that was supplied by Neptune in their system. And then those were installed back in 2003 at that time. And that meter was in place, or meter style was in place from 2003 until we just recently changed out the entire city to the new style of meter. As we're all well aware, and many of you are, is that AWWA usually recommends usually meter replacement at about 10 years or about 1 million miles or 1 million gallons. I call them miles, but 1 million gallons per meter on the residential side. When you start taking a look, so in how we got where we are today in 2016, the city was applying to the Texas Water Development Board for our surface water treatment plant, and that's using a low interest loan through that organization. That helps out cities such as us or larger cities around to provide that low interest funding and to be able to allow to fund those larger projects that way. As part of that, the Water Development Board noticed that we also had a meter changeout program scheduled for about 2 years later. We did have a little bit of higher water loss reported, and so they suggested that we can include the meter changeout program in that funding agreement at a zero interest loan for those meters. So we added that to our request. In 2017, we went through a several step process associated with selecting a meter supplier, meter vendor, and a infrastructure plan. This included taking a look at requests for express levels of interest. What that means is that basically we put out in the open market that we're interested in upgrading our meters to a newer system. What's it look like, and who's out there that could supply meters? So it allowed meters and infrastructure from a variety of systems to submit their information. We interviewed some to help clarify some questions so we could then work to develop with our engineer and consultants and our internal staff and our IT group led by Dan McGinnis to determine what would best work from a meter structure, a network, and then put together a request for proposals. With that, we submitted that request for proposals out. We received interest back in a variety and several different styles. We selected the Itron network with the OpenWay Riva system and the Badger E-Series meter. Badger is one of the major players in the meter market. Same with Neptune or Census. Those all offer these type of solid state meters. A picture of the actual meter infrastructure is on the slide. You'll see that the meter, that's your residential meter and endpoint. And then the city is taking a proactive approach, just so you know, is that on the city side of the distribution system, we've installed a leak detection, or it's called a leak sensor. It uses harmonics basically at night to calibrate, to determine, and be a proactive approach to any leaks in the distribution system, not on the customer side. And it's just an approach that's used to be able to be more investigative, as our water resources are precious, and we want to try and limit any water breaks or things that we're losing for accountability of water. Continue on, talk a little bit about the meters. Being in the business for a long time, I decided that what the heck, let's go ahead and show you what a mechanical meter is and all the intricacies associated with it. So our meter program we selected for the AMI is to have one contract to supply all the meters and the installation under one contractor or one entity to be able to do that. And so that also included boxes and lids, meaning that if we have a bunch of broken lids or boxes that were below ground, they would adjust them, raise them up so we can find them. And then also then go out and GPS all the meter locations so then we can accurately update our database of where those meters are for our meter readers and customer service reps when they go out later. And then also we'd be transitioning to the AMI network, which is a more real-time network. One of the benefits of what we chose, why we chose the Itron system associated with that, is that it is a open system. And what we mean by that is that it's not just set with the Badger meter. As long as the protocols are followed, we can then utilize, if we have to down the road, change out and go to either a different manufacturer, such as Census or Neptune or another one, as long as the protocols are followed to be able to upload that information into the endpoint. The meters are solid state. So why I put up here pictures is in the upper part of the slide is a Neptune small bodied mechanical meter. So working from left to right, you'll have the bottom of the meter. It's a cast plate that is then has a seal, which is I say it's a rubber seal, but it's more of a poly seal. You have several components inside that are moving parts. This whole item apparatus turns along with the oscillating disc inside is what turns. And on top is a magnet that I'm circling right here. That magnet then goes through the brass body. It sits in this recess right here and connects through the body of the brass up into the dial. And that is what turns the dial in a mechanical meter standpoint. There's also a screen here. So these meters over time in a small body configuration lose low flow capabilities over a period of time because they are a small body and turning more frequently. We have a lot of items that break in here, or if you have the screen breakdown, you'll start to see these meters slow down. They're like, the best thing I can compare it to is like your brakes on your car. They do really good at the very beginning, and over many miles of driving, they wear out. And takes you a little longer to stop. I just can only compare it to a wearing situation. They wear out and they slow down in reading accuracy. So we've gone with a solid state meter, and there's a picture of it right here in the tube, and you'll just see a couple apparatuses that are in here, and I'll show you on the next couple slides what those are. But those are sending the ultrasonic wave to go back and forth to be able to read the meter based off of calculations. And then, of course, the open part of the meter that you would see as a customer with the dials, and then the barcode and associated testing parameters and their test results that were done from the factory are listed on the front. So from there, their information is collected, and then we wanted to make sure that we can integrate within from the collection software to our billing software. So what is AMI? The advanced metering infrastructure, it's really just a bunch of group of components that will read the water consumption, such as the water meter, transmit that water, which is your endpoint, transmitting it up to the connected grid router, which we'll show you in a little bit, uploading that water consumption, and then sharing that water consumption out. And it's just a standard photo that we use that shows how it's from the house to the radio infrastructure into the utility office. So again, as I said, these meters are specific. They are solid state, meaning there's no moving parts. They use an ultrasonic signal that measures upstream and downstream over a period of time. So that's basically using your flow equals, your velocity times your area. It's simple math. With it, these meters are more accurate than the mechanical meters and keep that accuracy. They'll measure down to 0.1 gallons per minute, up to 25 gallons per minute at a plus or minus 1.5%, and low flow all the way down to the 0.05 gallons per minute, or 6 ounces of water is about what that equivalates to, of a plus or minus 3% on the low flow side.
Question. For the meter range, that works out to be about a 600 to 1 turn down ratio. Given that you've got a certain frequency pulse across the water, the gap, to calculate the volume, does Badger have to adjust that frequency query rate for the ultrasonic signal to get that 600 to 1 turn down? In other words, at a very low flow rate, you have to click at certain rate, and at a higher flow rate or intermediate, at that same rate, you're going to not be able to detect it.
So with the meter coming up in the picture here, but the meter, when it sends that ultrasonic signal back and forth, it takes the time that it also, how much time does it take to go between those 2 points? So when you're talking 600 turn down, your 600 click turn down, it's measuring and calculating. So it's an algorithm that is going back and forth and saying, how fast does that time of that signal go back and forth between those 2 points? So it's a time relation aspect too. So that's what's calculating and also encompassing what you're talking about on that 600 turn down.
Yeah, it's just that, the chip is running at some chip rate.
Yes, it is.
Right. And at a higher flow rate, you're going to start approaching the limit of the frequency. So the reason I'm asking is that it appears, based on the literature I'm looking at, that to get that range, they have to adjust the meter query rate or transmit rate in order to get that level of turn down. So at some point, we may have a conversation with the Badger folks is the challenge.
I understand. I mean, I know.
Mr. Upton, question. If I'm understanding you right, you're saying that the meter chip sends the signal at the same frequency, whether it's 5 times per second, 2 times per second. It doesn't change. The way it calculates is it determines how long it took, and the longer it took, the higher the flow rate. Am I understanding you right?
You're not quite there, and I'll have to get you a little bit more detail on the information. But with regards to, you start getting into Faraday's law, and you start getting into a lot of calculus and coming back and forth, and we can go that conversation, but that's all dealing with the ultrasonic pulse that's coming back and forth and going between those receivers and how much backwards and forwards that it bounces across the calculated diameter and the specific length of that tube that has been calculated to determine that volume, and then the resistance of that water, because that's where that flow comes in that you're talking about, Mr. King, and also Mr. Davis, how fast that's water and the resistance to that. All those are I'm just going to say it's an algorithm that's going to be done by smarter people than me. I like to coin that phrase from John. But I've got your question, and I'll ask that question, and we'll get some answers back. But you can kind of tell here is that in terms of that, and I'm trying to reiterate that, but it just, as you says here, is that an internal clock calculates the time. So if you got an internal clock, calculates the time between the two, and since the distance is known, the microprocessor can calculate the velocity. That velocity is then taken in there with the cross-sectional area, and then you'll get the volume.
Right. So Mr. Davis's comment, it's the faster the pulse is, the higher the flow rate. Is how they work. So as the pulses get quicker, then the flow, that means the water's moving faster, so there's more pulses.
I don't think. Let me feel that.
Yeah.
I think no, it's not so much the pulses. That you're looking at a difference of transmit time.
Yeah.
So the sound time to travel between the sensor going downstream versus the time of travel going upstream, that difference is what it uses to calculate the velocity, and then they calculate by the area of the meter to get the volumetric flow. It's just the challenge you have is that you recognize we've got a 601, we're measuring from a Pixie cup to literally a carboy in a minute.
Yes.
That range is very, very wide and as he described it, the internal clock calculates it. The internal clock has got a certain frequency, and that doesn't change. So you have to change, I think, this is a Badger discussion, I think you have to change the frequency of which you click. Recognizing this is a bat sound. It's ultrasonic. You can't hear it, but it sends an ultrasonic frequency click between the two sensors constantly. And I think the rate in which they click the sensors and measure the time has to vary in order to get a 600 to 1. There are very few fundamental calculations that can go that wide a range, and I think they have to change it. And based on what I've read in their literature, it appears they do some algorithm switch. And
well, there has to be, because that's what the computer processor is doing. Now, to answer your question, Mr. King, into the detail, then we're talking in bringing in the designer behind it, and I don't know. With that, it would be the same discussion that I would have if we had it with Census and their iPearl, or if we go with Neptune's and their solid state meter.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, because if you pull all of those, which are the three top manufacturers of this style of meter, now we can talk to Metron Fournier and Micrometer and Siemens. They're all using the same principle. You're all using that. It just depends. So, getting down to say, well, okay, your microprocessor wants to do 600 to 1 turn down versus this guy's 500 to 1 turn down. I'm not going to say that's not an irrelevant discussion, but it's a great discussion to get down into the really needy weeds, which is kind of fun to have. But in terms of whether you want to say the Badger meter is bad and we want to go with the Census, you're going to have the same microprocessor with the same discussion that we're having today, because they're going to do the same turn downs.
And that's not where we're headed. The question that is evident and that we're kind of struggle with and get to. There's there's a fundamental difference between the old meters and this meter.
Yes, sir.
Or this technology period. And that is, the other meter will always read low when it starts to go bad, or when it has something wrong with it. These meters, especially electronic and algorithm, if it misses the click and it calculates a longer interval because it did not hear or it was incapable of hearing, it gives you a high reading, not a low reading.
But the other aspect, as it runs through its calculations too, it also has its ability to alarm. And then that's where the aspect that you have the association of something's wrong, and then you need to go investigate the meter. So
yeah, and
there
my point, and it ties to that because my meter was an alarm for going on ever since I started watching it, and it only went off alarm in the last 4 weeks.
Well, there's a couple things.
Yeah.
There's a couple things associated with that, with what that a note with an alarm is. If it's a true malfunction, if it is a true malfunction, then it will keep that alarm there. Some of the alarms associated with, let's say I had a high flow event, which is greater than 25 gallons a minute in the calculation for, as it sends its signal, I think on a 60 hertz, so every second it's checking, then the aspect is that notation stays there on the screen for 60 days. If it is a true malfunction, then that screen will be different and it won't, it'll have a different code to it. I don't say code, but a different, and it'll have a malfunction that picks up. So there's different looking at it. And let me say is that if it has a check box, a little check mark on it, on the meter display, then it's working correctly. Even though it may show a little bit of what I say is what you're saying is an alarm, because it's keeping something in the system that occurred that doesn't affect the meter itself. It's just letting you know that, hey, you had a high flow, or to that effect. Okay. So
yeah, well, mine was an alarm. Mine was an alarm for months with no check. It did finally clear.
Okay.
So, but and that's that's where we're headed. So,
yeah.
All right,
Mr. Upton, this is Denise Hewitt. I just wanted to ask. So, if you're setting off alarms, and are they picking those up when they do a read, or are they simply picking up reads? What happens to those alarms right now?
That'll be a question that'll be a question as I get through the presentation that I can. I probably will have that answer for you as I get to the next few slides.
Well, then I'll probably watch for it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Upton, if I can ask, can you go back? I believe is the previous slide that had the range of the meter. Okay, yeah. So the operating range is 0.1 to 25 gallons per minute. If a resident gets a profile report that says in 1 hour they used 0.02 gallons, how, and I guess I'd have to ask here, I see the slide says operating range 0.1 to 25 and low flow to 0.05. Those are a little confusing, but how would a resident in an hour have 0.02 gallons?
I'm trying to kind of understand your question, Mr. Davis, because if it's showing flow, which it registered 0.02 gallons, it measured 0.02 gallons. It's not saying that's 0.20 gallons an hour. It's just for a specific, if they flush the toilet on the break of the hour, where you used 1.4 gallons of water in your toilet and part of it was in the previous hour and the remaining balance is in this hour, and it registered 0.02 for the hour because of the crossover, then you would have that 0.02 showing up.
Okay. Yeah, I'm talking more middle of the night, they had 0. Then the next hour they had 0.02. Then the next hour they had 0, or, in that situation. And I'm trying to understand what's the difference on this slide. Operating range 0.1 to 25, but low flow to 0.05. So is the operating range 0.05 to 25, or?
Okay, well, let me clarify. Let me answer your question. So the operating range of the meter that's certified from plus or minus 1.5% on the operating range is 0.1 to 25 gallons per minute. They also will certify that the low flow range, that it can pick up low flows, or it can, register low flows all the way to 0.5 at plus or minus 3% low flow. That's also what's called out for in the testing criteria associated with M6 addendum in 2018, table 1 of the AWWA standard. That's the same ranges that are there that are called out, is that plus or minus 3% and the plus or minus 1.5% at what I'll say is high, intermediate, and low flow. But they also say is that their low flow is, as per their literature and as shown, is they can register these low flows, but plus or minus 3% at the 0.05 is what they will certify. Doesn't mean that it doesn't register things lower. And it also means that from 25 and above to 35 gallons a minute for a residential meter of a 5/8 by 3/4, they will register up to 35 gallons a minute. The accuracy will be below the outside the normal operating range that they'll certify at 1.5 plus or minus.
Okay, perfect.
So
Last
they will
question.
register.
When you talked about the normal mechanical meters, what's the expected life on those?
That's totally up to how they're operated and how they're used. Some company or some cities will just leave them in the ground and won't replace them. But as per the AWWA standard, I mean, you look at a 10-year, million miles is kind of an aspect, or you take a look after a certain amount of time, you may pull them out and test them. If they don't meet the standards that are set forth for your particular city, then you can rebuild them or you just replace them.
What has been our city's stance on that, Robert?
I'll need to get back with the working with metering services and the UB group on that in terms of sometimes they've just replaced them, but I don't have that.
Did you have a planned test, planned replacement?
Well, that was what was part of this driving this program, is that 2003 was our last meter change out program. And then we were looking to change those meters and change them up in 2019. And Water Development Board asked us to move it up and include it into our application when we did the surface water plant.
That's what, 16 years? AWWA says 10 years?
Remember, AWWA it's a guideline. It's a guideline through testing and taking a look too. Is that?
But if we don't have a testing program, right? So, just trying to understand that. Thank you.
So the 10-year, million miles, that's the recommended, whether it's a solid state or a mechanical. They pretty much both are expected to.
I'd have to go talk to you about the solid state, but that's always been the literature and the standard for the mechanical meter. So I'll need to go back in.
Okay.
But that's always been 10 years, a million miles. Guarantees on the E-Series on the accuracy is on 20 years. We have a 20-year warranty on these meters.
Okay. Can you speak at all about how these meters can detect and how accurate they are on reverse flow?
I think you and I, we've had that discussion already, is that with regards to this, they can detect reverse flow, but to a very small amount. As we've talked about, they've said to about a -4 gallons a minute at most. After that, as with anything that goes backwards in this, is that the accuracy is not there and you can get erratic readings.
When meters are read, are they notified? Do we find out if a reverse flow happened when we pull the meter reads?
In this discussion, under this particular presentation, I don't believe that's a question that I have prepared to answer. This was to talk about giving a higher level on that, and that would have to be a discussion that I'd have to bring in with Ms. Massey.
All right.
I can tell you, Robert, that from my perspective, it is with respect to the committee members' questions, it's getting a little weedy for me, and I think the committee's drive here was to understand scope, scale, timing first, and then I love the technical conversation, obviously, but I think that would give us some perspective and context that we could dive in and understand the importance of these details. So. What were you, how many slides are you prepared to go through?
I have, I think 3 more.
Okay, excellent.
So talked about that. Well, actually 2 more after this, just to kind of finish out a little bit on how the system works as a whole, is that we have endpoints, which we already saw that are part of the meter. Then you have connected grid routers. We'll have a total of 53 throughout the city. Those 53 will be located on poles that will be established throughout the city on 60 feet in height. We already have 26 that are located within city facilities. We'll be installing another 27. With that, the CGR will be located on the around 15 feet from the ground, and antennas will be ran up the top of the pole. We've done this based off of propagation study. Therefore, that way we can have redundancy and coverage. Once the AMI network is active.
Oops. I'm sorry. Can you go back?
Yes, ma'am.
When you talk about a pole, is that,
yes.
I guess that's a metal or a concrete. Is that where you're going to drive down to your backbone?
Drive down to your backbone.
Where do you enter backbone?
What do you mean?
Your systems. Where do you come into your systems?
So from the connected grid router, those signals are transmitted and then they're sent back to City Hall. They're sent back and utilizing the software that we have. Is that what you're asking for? Are you asking for cell service, fiber service? I'm just wondering how you get that. So from that tower, you're sending them back to city. What is that? You're sending all the data. So with that, I know, but what are you sending? Are you still sending a signal through the air? Yes. And what's catching it? The receivers that will be back at City Hall that will pick that information up that's sent. And then that takes it to the system.
So the whole system is basically is its own Pearland cellular. Correct.
Right.
We'll have some that are running on cell. We'll have some that'll be running on fiber because we have fiber. We have a city fiber nearby at our plants, and so we'll eventually hook those up to fiber, so they'll have a backbone that way. I'm sorry. I needed to clarify what you meant by backbone, Miss Hewitt. I apologize. That's okay. That's all right. As soon as you said fiber, I knew that's where you went. Okay. So a little bit about the network itself is that the endpoints are actively collecting hourly meter reads from the meter. The endpoints through the connected grid router will be interrogated every 8 hours. That means 8 hours of data will then be collected and then sent back and uploaded. And this is through the Itron's Open Way Operations Center. For short, it's OWOC. But that is the system that's collecting that data, and that information is then transmitted over to utility billing. From that standpoint, we're looking actually is that you asked about schedule, Mr. Sabo, is that we are actually starting and putting up our first connected grid routers on Monday and starting that system on existing poles. We'll be putting 5 to 6 up and get the network active so we can start making sure that the coverage is good from a network standpoint. And then we'll start looking at switching over a selected area of endpoints to allow them to connect to the network. From that standpoint, we'll be then allowing them to collect and get into the data system and start doing the data analysis and make sure that everything is stable, working. And while that is continuing, we'll be continuing out, installing new poles, continuing moving forward with the goal of anticipating completing all installation of the network aspects by the end of May. And then the system is being collectively switched over to the AMI, basically in concentric circles around each of the towers so that we select a small population at a time. The reason why is that it takes a little bit of time for the endpoints to connect to the connected grid router. It's just a function of getting your phone connected to the cell tower. It takes time. It takes a little bit of time to do that. Now, amidst all that time from there is that staff is still working at this time right now on developing a customer portal that'll be able for customers to take a look at their usage tracking. And then also we're taking a look and testing the alerts and how they are collected, transmitted, and seeing how we can also transmit those to the portal as well. So with that.
Could I, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine, Ms. Hewitt.
You just thought you were done.
No, ma'am.
So in that operations center, I mean, that's like 2 little words, but I think there's a lot of stuff going on there. Is that Itron's DCE MDM architecture?
You mean the FDM? That's field data. You got the.
So it's calling it FDM now?
Well, I mean, there's about 17 different acronyms, and I'll tell you honestly.
So what are they doing inside that operations center?
That is the collection data point, and it's also the software that's there that basically is collecting all the data. We have analytics in there as well that then Miss Massey and her group are able then to start taking a look at the things that they're doing right now, be able to look at it on the analytics side in there. And then that information can also be utilized as we've talked about with the customer portal.
Right. So it is their DCE MDM architecture because you're collecting, right? Then you're handing it off through into another area where they've done some data checking, where they can start manipulating and doing their analytics. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Upton, that operation center is not something that Itron actually controls, accesses, that's outside of our control, is it?
It's an on-prem software. They call it an operation center. It's not like what you think of as a traffic operations center where we have screens and all this. It's the software behind it, and we host that on-prem with the IT department.
Perfect. Thank you.
Robert, my question about the project overview rather is trying to build off of the Raftellus, I'll call it the highlight of the major themes that are kind of coming out of our study, one of which was the importance and the need for the AMI system and how the project implementation itself is integrated with utility billing. So at what point, and I'm assuming you either got a project manager for this or you've got direct oversight of the scope of this project, at what point do you acknowledge that the installation of the network is step one, but then there's lots of other things that come along behind that, including training of utility billing around how to use the system, how to deal with the data, asking them to consider one of the things that holds us back right now in terms of analysis of the data and things like that is the fact that it's a text file that's created and it's not easily sorted and analyzed and such, right? So at what point has utility billing been involved with that aspect of design? And at what point will they be kind of brought in for training and education and things like that?
Well, actually, Mr. Sabo, is that both the IT department and utility billing have been part of this process along with metering services for an extensive amount of time. We had to have IT from the very beginning because we had to do what's called Article 1 testing to make sure equipment meets. IT has been heavily involved to be able to make sure that they are following our security profiles and protections. That required some delays due to them having to make sure they meet Mr. McGinnis's requirements because we want to have a safe and secure system for our customers. With that, utility billing has been involved. Utility billing is now taking the lead on training. I've asked them to do that because, like I said, they're the ones that are going to be running and taking that lead on the system. We have, with the CGRs that are being installed and data in the network starting to take active this month, or I'm sorry, March 1. UB is taking the lead and training will begin in the middle of March on both all the systems, but they have been heavily involved from the beginning so that they are learning because of the fact that while we were making the switch over, not only did we have the original Neptune system from 2003, we have been also operating the AMR system or the drive-by system for Itron through the field data collector and system. So that's been part of, UB has been part of that. So along with metering services. So we've been hand in hand since the beginning of the project when we started the kickoff of starting to change meters after we've been through the IT department and still integral today to make sure it's integrated correctly into the city services.
What's your go live date?
What's my what?
What's your go live?
My go live? When we go live, so we're taking up, we'll say 5 endpoints next week or 5 points next week on the CGRs to start taking a look at that. Then we will switch over a certain amount of endpoints after everything is stable on the network for those particular, for that area. And then
what's the certain number? I guess I PM the smart meters for CenterPoint Energy. So I'm just wondering, what's your major milestones? What are the dates that are associated with that that's taken us to go live?
So the aspect, what you're asking for specifically is that once the network's up and running, and we'll say we switch over 200 meters to allow them to connect, to see the length of time, we get the history on the data behind them and make sure that they switch over correctly.
What's your projected?
From that for switching over, probably about 2 weeks to switch some of them over. And then that starts collecting data into the collection system, so that then utility billing, when they have their training, will have some data to work with, because it works better if you have live data to be able to see the analytics and work from there. So that's what part of the training protocol is as well. From that standpoint, as continued CGRs move out, then we'd be looking to expand that service. And that, of course, has to correlate in a dance with when reads are for each particular cycle.
So system-wide, go ahead, Denise.
I guess I'm not sure that what the dance is. Are you going to start polling every 8 hours?
No, what the other avenue is, and I know Ms. Massey will probably answer a lot more, is that under the 3230 plan, you're still reading meters on specific dates. And so we need to make sure that when we're ready to flip over or switch over an area, that area has already either been read or is in the middle of a cycle. So we are not switching over someone who needs to be read tomorrow. Then that endpoint is taking a certain amount of time to switch, and we miss that read. That's the point of why I'm saying there's a little bit of a dance in terms of what area gets switched over into what frequency and cycle, just to make sure that we continue to follow the plan as outlined.
So are you considering
question. Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. Are you actually considering your production go live when all meters are on AMI?
No, you'll be running live on some areas as they switch over. I keep trying to use switch versus flip.
Can we see a timeline of that? Can we get some milestones or project timeline of where you are and where you're going and what those dates look like? Because if we're going to make decisions around 3230, I think it would be good for us to, I don't know, maybe see it to make sure we can better align.
I'm going to ask Ms. Hewitt, what are you trying to, because the milestone is once we start putting CGRs up next week and we start switching over endpoints and we see in a week that everything works good and it's seeing data, then that process will continue until we're done.
But don't you have that baked into a project plan? You're not running that willy-nilly.
Oh,
right?
No.
Okay, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for your milestones and your project plan.
Yeah, maybe if we take a step back from this, Robert, and just kind of give you some of the conversations that we've had thus far. We've been asked to take a look at the 3230 plan and where it fits in context and the pros and cons that come out of everything addressed in the Raftellus report. And a general concept here would be, it would be nice to resolve the gap or this arrearage prior to any live implementation of any aspect of the AMI project. And I'm talking about data collection, for real use to be converted into an invoice to a user, to a consumer. And so I think what I'm hearing in your presentation is that this is much, much sooner than any of us imagined. And I think for context, we would love to hear the goal is hardware will be in place so that we can collect live data by May the 1st. But we're not going to do that until certain milestones are met. And those milestones include training, testing, making sure that we move through a test database and, all that kind of stuff. From the citizen's perspective, given that this is a big part of an attempt to rebuild trust after we've been through some issues over the last couple of years. I'm not hearing what I would be interested in hearing from a citizen's perspective about how this is going to help me, and to the point where I would have some confidence in it. So I think we need to address the PR aspects of this. I think I'd like to hear from Nancy around, once the hardware is installed, how are you going to catch this ball and make sure your team is trained? And lastly, I think I'd like to hear Raftelis's opinion on this too, because they spent considerable time in their recommendation report talking about these very issues. So Nancy, maybe we can start with hearing your perspective on this and how you intend to use the system that Robert and his team are creating for you.
Thank you, Chairman Sabo. What we're looking at is that once the CGRs start going up and we begin to look at these first 100 water meters that they want to switch from AMR to AMI, we're laying out a plan on that to look at each one of those 100 water meters that are coming over and be able to pull a meter profile on each one of those and validate that information by making sure that all 100 water meters are shown up in the meter profiles. And also then we'll be able to pull the information into the system, into the AMI system. We also want to make sure it validates into what we see in New World. We want to make sure that the reading, the meter numbers, the endpoints, all that information all matches up still with New World. And then at that point, once we could do that, we can begin at that point knowing that we can start billing from those AMI numbers or AMI information. We are going to have some training. Our training starts on the 16th of next month. And matter of fact, before I got on this call today, I was on the call with my UB leadership team with the ITRON individuals to set up the training that we're going to be having. That'll be divided out by roles by each one of the divisions that we have, whether it's customer service, it's the billing individuals, as well as the management staff, to know what we have to maintain on this system itself. Reports that we run the interrogation reports every day to ensure that the interrogations are being met on the endpoints. So I'm really looking forward to this information. As Mr. Upton said, since I've been here last April, I've been in depth into this AMI project itself. So I'm very much looking forward to this and getting into its completion and bringing it all completely into this department, as well as IT will have their piece of it as well to go over, handle the roles and all the configurations and settings and so forth.
I know I for one would like to hear Raftelis give us a little bit of perspective here in terms of the treatment in your report about this. Staff's comments kind of in return were basically that generally there's agreement and they expect that there will be good involvement by staff and things like that. But would you spend some time talking about why you chose to emphasize this as a major theme in the overall review?
Yeah, certainly. I can give you some highlights of that. I think, technically we got some good background on, how the system works and functions. And I think the staff largely have that under control. The reason we emphasize it so much is because there's going to be some fundamental changes in how work practices happen once the system gets implemented, particularly on the meter services side. You're going to have a lot better access to performance of the meters. You're not going to have to necessarily wait till that meter reading comes through, gets into the billing system, and then generates an exception or error report. Some errors are going to be generated right from the system on an ongoing basis. So there needs to be some processes in place and folks trained on how to respond to those things. That was one piece that we were emphasizing. The other piece is on sort of the ongoing training of not just how to use the meter data that comes through for billing purposes, but how staff would respond to things such as, high meter or high billing issues, meter issues, how to pull that, the training associated with those things. how to access meter reads and data. And, you know, Ms. Massey discussed that there would be some ongoing training on those things. Those are the kind of things we wanted to make sure were in place and tested before the system fully went live.
Patrick, I think you had tried to get a question in earlier. Did you get your question asked and or answered?
Well, I guess, no, so for me, once we start to go live with this, so that we have a timeline about what we need to do about 3230, how hard is it to change it from 32 to change the billing cycles? I mean, does it take a long time, a lot of effort, finances in order to change it to a different, billing cycle?
I'll field that question for you, Mr. O'Day. As a matter of fact, I'm trying to put together a thought process on that, and trying to see if you pulled the trigger, say on June 1st, what would that look like, and how do you take it from the 3230 and blend it into what we have now? And so I'm trying to put that together. It is difficult. It is something that's time consuming, and you want to make sure that it's correct. And so that's what I'm looking at. I'm basing that off of the information that the proposed ordinances that we've given to council, of the time frame of within due dates within 20 business days, the arrearage looking at 10 to 15 days. And so it's putting that all into perspective, as well as one of the recommendations by Raftillis was to synchronize the billing cycles. And so the goal would be to have each one of the billing cycles have a set bill date itself. That way, when you have that, you know that your bill goes out at that date into the system, goes out to you on that date. And that could be consistently sent to you. So that's what that's what I'm looking to do, as well as to ensure that you have one due date per month, and they have that as well.
Yeah, because I think it's very difficult to put something in place whenever you don't even know exactly what the billing cycle is going to be at this time. I mean, it's going to be counterproductive almost to have to start over if it's a difficult process.
You're expecting to do that anyway, because if you're looking at one of the options of options of getting rid of 3230, this is something we were needed to look at and see what we have to do, as well as when you look at moving ahead. This is with the transition that Mr. Upton was indicating, you're looking at the fact that that it's going to be a small numbers of meters are going to be switched over from AMR to AMI. And with that, you're still going to have to run both systems. And so with that, with AMI, we'll be able to pull the readings off the system itself, but the AMR is still going to have to be driven by meter services to get those readings and do those things. So it is something that we have to continue to do.
Can I go ahead and add something real quick to follow off with what Ms. Massey's talking about when she was talking about drive-by and AMI? And that was what I was referring to with Ms. Hewitt on the dance between it. So we make sure that we hit the reads correctly. We maintain that, and that's the complexity a little bit that's still will have to be battled as we go through. Yes, would we like to flip them as quick as possible? Absolutely. However, just as with anything, it's amount of data that has to be collected and transferred across that network, and that's why we want to do this in small batches and then validate them to make sure that those endpoints have all transferred over and they are being read. And so it'll take some time. And yes, with the intent and the goal to be completed by the end of May.
Nancy, are you considered the project lead or project manager from utility billing's perspective on this thing we're calling AMI?
Yes, sir. I'm considered the project lead and taking the lead on the training and the AMI. I'm very fortunate that myself, Ms. Ng, who's on here as well as the assistant manager, as well as our customer service supervisor, all came from AMI backgrounds. Myself and Dara and Miss Lori Flores. We're from 3 different cities. We've worked with AMI before, so we're familiar with how the process works. So that was one of the major reasons too, Mr. Sabot, that once our team, or the billing team, as well as a couple of the meter services team members, have access to the Itron analytics, the online system itself. Though we only have 2 water meters in there right now, I wanted the team to be acclimated to see what those screens look like. What does it look like to see where that meter's located? What is that reading? How do you see that data? How do you see the daily data? I wanted them to be familiar with it before we go into all the training. And I found that to be most beneficial for the team, to be acclimated into all that. So they don't look like deer with lights. What do they say? Deer with the headlights look in their face? Yeah. So that's what I was trying to get. I want to get that ease feeling to them, because you're right. Software 16th, 17th, and 18th, sir. So
Okay.
I just want to give you, but I'll be more than happy to share that information.
Very good.
Kind of in the context of, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just got 2 questions for Mr. Upton.
Go ahead, Ralph. Sorry.
I noticed in the write-up and the discussions that the Water Development Board made the recommendations to include the meters in the replacement because the system losses were higher than what they typically accept. Since you've implemented the new meters, what is the system losses looking like?
So one, with regards to that, with our system meter, our water losses were well within parameters that are allowed, or what they would like to see. I don't have the answer to give you the official numbers. I'll need to talk with utilities and public works.
Okay. Yeah.
But I know that they are within that range that our industry standard runs at, which is, and I'm going to say industry standard, a lot of times among all public works utilities run 5 or 7 to 10% is in that range. But to get an official number where we're at, I'd have to talk with
What I'm wondering is as you implemented the smart meters, did that improve, and by how much?
Well, I think there's probably some others that other complexities probably many years ago that when that application was done, we probably had a bunch of broken meters, and those meters were replaced over time. And that changes the perspective. So then when you take a look at the subsequent following years, we would be in parameters. It just may have been that 1 year where we had a bad parameter.
Okay. And then the other question is that did they share with you the presentation that was given to the committee that was basically, and I've got to get to the title slide here, the utility billing analysis that was done on the financial bills?
Would that be through the Raptilis report?
No, this is something that your staff did looking at the 2 months of usage data for September and October.
I'd have to go back and take a look and refresh.
Yeah,
I'm sure I have it, but
yeah. Be sure. I was just asking you to look at slide. Let me see which slide it is. Slide 30. And basically, that slide shows us where people had an increase of 100% or more. And the x-axis is water bills increased by a certain amount of dollars. And my point is to take a look at that slide, and you'll see the itch that we're attempting to scratch.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Upton, 3 things if we can. When you get us the water loss, could we get a chart of water loss for the last 5 years, each year, so we can kind of see what it looks like? And my mind blanked on the other 2. Is there a schedule that you can provide us that shows when the CGRs are going to be installed? Has the contractor outlined how many per week? This week we're going to be doing these, and by what time they'll actually be done with that?
Yeah, I believe that's what Ms. Hewitt was asking for too, which also had the milestones, which has that laid out, which we've had some modifications a little bit, and I'm waiting for the update on the schedule. But as of right now, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the first 5 will be installed.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to make sure if there was one that specifically addressed the installation of those. I think hers is a bit more overarching and probably looking for more, but that's what I was.
Mr. Davis, it's detailed in the full schedule because we have to control and know where things are going as we're progressing.
All right.
And so even though it may be rolled up into a line item, it could unroll in showing kind of where the progression would be.
All right. That sounds good.
I had one more thing. As far as the implementation of it, I think that it'd be good if we could have a packet or something, just a one-page deal that we could send out to homeowners so that they knew what all the things in the dials meant. So if they were looking at a fault or something to that effect, that they could, it's something that people even know what they're looking at.
I was looking for my mute button. I agree with you, Mr. O'Day. As a matter of fact, that's a discussion that I'll be having with the Public Works Department next week. What we're looking to do is we're looking to put something on the web page or website, just going to say meters, and so that they can talk about, you know, how these meters work, how the information about it. You know, we don't want this to no longer be like a black box that's mysterious. We want that information out there for the customer so they could see that and how they're read and so forth. Just like you said, the dials themselves. So I appreciate the question, and we're trying to get ahead of that.
Yeah, I'd just like to add on that. I think there's value in talking about AMI as a project as well. Again, from the citizens' perspective, what's in it for them, what should they expect, when should they expect it, and you know, it's a little bit of PR, obviously, but I think that is part and parcel to the effort that this committee is trying to help with. You know, being able to communicate with them. You know, reasonably be patient. Things are coming. Here's what we expected. Here's the benefit that we expect you to see from this. And then the counter of that, Nancy, this is directed to you, is given a lot of the things we've talked about, what risks do you see in this project? You don't necessarily have to answer right now, but certainly at next meeting or something, it'd be nice to hear what concerns you've got. Whether that's timeline or resources or whatever it is, because all of those are addressed in the RefTelis staff communication. And I think it'd be important to kind of hear from your perspective. Are you getting the support that you think you need? Are you getting air cover when you need it? Are there budget constraints? All those kinds of things to make sure that we're getting everybody's voice out on the table in this context.
I appreciate it, Chairman Sabot. I have not had any kind of restraints on what we're doing. If anything, it's been very helpful, very supportive in all the aspects that we've been doing in all the departments in doing this. So it's been very helpful to us, and I look forward to continue the same path. So I'll continue looking at the different things. I have to emphasize too what Mr. Upton said too. We won't go forward until we validate this information and ensure that information matches what we have in the new world, as well as having the meter profiles pulled for all of the accounts is what we're trying to do for all the meters out there. Pull those meter profiles so we have that information, and so that's what the goal is. So that way, if a customer does say to us, "Hey, I want to know what this is," we can go back from the AMI as well as go back and look at and pull the meter profile on that information.
All right, we're getting towards the end of our scheduled time, and as we've been trying to do, I want to go around the horn, so to speak, and see if there's open questions on behalf of members we haven't heard anything from or much from today. So, Mark, have you got questions or comments? I want to invite you to have the opportunity to get your thoughts out.
Not necessarily. I mean, it's definitely good background for me. I'm not nearly as versed in the whole process as some of the committee members, so it was helpful for me to at least get a better overview of how it happens. So, but other than that, I really don't have any questions.
All right, great, thank you. Jennifer, how about you?
I don't have any questions at this time. you hear me?
Thank you. And Julie?
I don't have any questions. I agree. It was helpful. And I think, again, taking the high points and potentially using that, broadcasting it to the public just so that everybody could have the understanding, I think is very helpful.
Great. Ralph, any other thoughts?
I don't think so. You know, it's just we've got some future highlights coming. So I can't wait to see what the metrics are capable of for the new system. So if there's any way out of the woods, that may be our lamp.
Jimmy, additional thoughts, questions, comments?
Nothing, thank you.
Patrick?
The only additional comment that I have is as far as the events of, I don't know, it seems like yesterday, the freeze, I haven't seen anything or heard anything as far as the city addressing busted pipes and water usage and how that's going to be handled. If it's out there, I just haven't seen it. I'm not on Facebook or some of the other stuff. So I just think that if we get in front of that and tell them how it's going to be handled before everybody just wonders what's going to happen, because the situation we're in, we're not going to get our bills till May or whatever it is. You know, that just needs to be handled sooner than later for people that are getting busted pipes, and whether they need to notify, if that's all that needs to be told to them, notify us this happened. I just think that needs to be sent out to the public because of our current billing situation, and it's hard to argue what happened 2 months ago.
I can jump in and respond to that real quick. We have a plan with management that we just actually sent on today. So we'll be making a plan public in the coming days to get ahead of that, but agree 100% with everything that was just said.
Thank you.
Good comments. Thank you, Patrick.
I think that this is going to be awesome because whenever you do the meters the way that we're doing it, you can look at, I assume, probably daily usage and see where the spike was, and then be able to go back to it. But again, until we get to where we're current billing, we're beating a dead horse, kind of.
Denise, any thoughts or comments on your part?
No, I thought it was great high level. Maybe I just think a little bit more detailed, so I'm looking forward to the next one. And I definitely wanted to say on behalf of all of us, I hope you don't mind me speaking for you, I'd like to thank John McCarter for all of his contributions. He's been a real asset. And so just thanks, John. I've appreciated you.
Thank you, and you're welcome.
Well, thanks for mentioning that, Denise, and Mr. Upton, of course, for coming to join us today for that overview. We appreciate that. I found it very interesting. Learned quite a bit. So thank you for spending some time with us.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you all, committee, for taking the time and the interest in this too. I know it's a challenge and it's interesting. I'll just say is that for me on the new meters, I like them because when I did a meter change out program many years ago, taking apart 14,000 meters in the other style to recycle and get the best value for that, I don't ever want to do that again. So, but with that, it's a monumental project, and I'll say that from the beginning to do this. So thank you very much for taking an interest in it.
All right, I think I hit everybody. Did I miss anyone on the committee? I apologize if so. Let's talk about a couple things as we contemplate the next meeting. Any conflicts with same time next Thursday? Anybody aware of a conflict? And not hearing any. If you wouldn't mind, if one comes up, please send an email to Denise and I.
I do. I have a small conflict right at 5. It might be something that I can pop in and pop out for 15 minutes or so.
Okay, great, Julie. What are Denise? What are your thoughts, and what's the committee's thoughts with regards to the next step here? Certainly, hearing the financial summary, should it be ready, is front and center. It's going to answer open questions that we've got. I think it's going to, lend impetus in terms of timeline, how much we have to learn about the financial aspects of 3230, so that we can either provide feedback or ask additional questions. So I certainly think that ought to be on the agenda for next week. An open question on behalf of just being good stewards of the citizens' funds here at the city. Should we have Ref tell us at the next meeting, or should we allow them to hold their available hours for future meetings? I think with a financial background that we expect to hear from staff, I'm not necessarily sure Ref tell us is going to be a heavy contributor for next meeting, but I'd like to hear everybody's thoughts.
I agree, Steve.
The only thought I have, Steve, is if we wanted to continue with, trying to look at my agenda, 3.b with the agreed with caveats, going over the next level of recommendations, that might be helpful. It's 5, 8, 11, and 16. It would be helpful if we had them for that, or do we hold off? I just don't, from John, he said it was going to be 2 weeks, so I don't know that we'll have any financials. So do we delve into the rest of the recommendations and knock those out of the ballpark, so to say, or make a good stab at it? And then also I wanted to ask, what's our next step on the meters? Do we try to have more in-depth, kind of looking at Jimmy and Ralph for this, I guess, maybe? Are they ready for Badger to participate, or is that possible?
I think starting the conversation with Badger to find their availability is probably a good idea. I'm guessing might be a couple weeks. I definitely think we need to start that discussion.
Okay, who takes that action item?
Mr. Hewitt, Mr. Sabo, and Mr. Davis, if I could, I'd like to ask the question a little bit, is that to help prepare Badger with that, to have the right kind of staff members associated with it? I think I'd like to know a little bit about what, besides Mr. King's question, what information are you looking to want to ask?
I think that's a very common sense request there, and I think I would encourage those on the committee that we can regard as subject matter experts, or at least very knowledgeable on this, to prepare a list of curiosities and questions that are either consistent with or above and beyond what we discussed today. I think we could do that, and Ralph, maybe I could ask you to share that, so to speak, and help collect that information. That would be really helpful.
Yeah, well, and we'll put together a list of questions we have for Badger. And going again, Mr. Upton, if you take a look at that one slide, basically the question that's the du jour that's got everybody, in particularly a number of citizens, is we're getting reported high, exorbitant usage. And the response so far, and we could argue back and forth about this, but you have a leak. But the one slide that we had that was provided, showed one person had their bill go up by $3,000, and then there's a whole slew of other people that went up 250, 300, 400, 200, and this is just the top 171 accounts. And so the challenge we have is what, we're looking both at a system-wide, and Raftilla solved the issue that once the usage data is presented and loaded to the system, it's producing a correct bill. So the question has to be is what is the cause for these high usages? And I've got, even my bill, I cannot explain, even using irrigation, how I can get this high of usage. And so it comes down to a question, Is there something going on? And there's a number of potential root causes, of which I think almost all of them are Badger's issues. And so I don't know. The point I make is we can ask certain questions, but the challenge I think we have is did we end up with some intermittent or programming or something error that only occurs every so often? And what is the root cause of that? I don't know. We don't, when we've got billing running 2 months behind, there's no way that we can identify that. And so that's the challenge we have. And again, go back to the slide. If you'll let me share my screen, unshare, and I'll just show you the slide. Let's see if I can do it.
Let's keep in mind we're at 6:02.
Yeah, we're running out of time. But yeah, y'all see my screen?
No.
No.
Okay, hold on. Entire screen, yes. Share. It's trying. It's connecting. Never mind.
Real quick, while you're trying to get that up, I don't know if our scope is to get into the data. Our recommendation to the city is to contract with Badger to verify that the meters are correct once a quarter, once a year, just 50 meters across the city. Or what recommendations do we give them to ensure that they're correct? The first one is to call Badger in to have them spot check them to make sure all of them are programmed correctly and so forth. Then we can go from that point forward. But as far as our scope, we're giving a recommendation to council about how to proceed, to make sure that the bills are correct.
Yeah. And I'm not so sure. The challenge I think we have is that it's not an accuracy question. That's not the problem with the meters. And we can talk about what different failure modes are and what potential error can occur. But and that's how come when we pull a meter data going back as far as it is, the 40 days, you don't find it. And part of the reason is we're doing it 2 months late. But the other end of it is that whatever this little failure is causing these usage is a challenge. So I don't know. Can y'all see my screen?
Yes.
I see your screen.
This is a slide, Mr. Upton, that we're really in. This is just an example. We're seeing this reported in the Facebook group every month.
And this doesn't even account for my bill.
Yeah,
right?
Bill,
because I didn't double.
My bill's not in there.
Yeah.
And so these are increased by 100%. But my point is that guy right there, these folks right here, I don't know what's going on. And there doesn't seem to be what's been reported by the user, by the consumer, that there's an explanation as to how this is occurring. And I had the same question with my meter. And so, and I think, I'm going to say this, just a general view, I think Badger has a problem that they may either not know about or they're not willing to discuss. I don't know. And it be of an intermittent nature. And I don't know what that intermittent nature is. And we'll just kind of, and maybe at some point we don't care. How many of these have you returned on warranty so far? Do we know?
I have a list of that, Ralph, actually, because that's information as a resident that I asked for. I can share that with you.
Okay. I'm assuming there's some infant mortality for new meters. There got to be some of them that are left the factory broke. It's got to be very small. Should be.
But I think this gives you, Robert, where our question. I didn't want to cut you off, Ralph. We're sitting at 6:06. Yeah. It gives you an idea of what we're trying to wrap our head around. and would like some answers. I mean, my next door neighbor's meter appears to run backwards. Mine runs forward fast. If we could just marry them, we would get a meter. And so it's those things that we see that are oddities, but there's a large number of oddities. Yeah. And so that's where we want to start asking questions, right?
And I'm going to be reaching out to some of the residents who have sent me profiles. And I think perhaps getting those to Badger will be helpful, because there's a lot of questions that is coming out of the profiles. And we can make a list of questions. Okay, how does the meter reflect this and that? And given some back narrative that says, based on what we know, this doesn't seem right. So help us understand how the meter can reflect this.
All right, Ralph, I think we've probably got enough there to gather information, put a list of questions together, concepts together there, and communicate with Mr. Upton, Ms. Massey around what might be a good next step with Badger or otherwise.
Right. We'll do that.
Denise, back to your comments earlier. I think based on Nancy, can we use you as kind of a point of contact with the transition going on with Mr. McCarter to give us some feedback as to whether or not the financial presentation will or won't be ready for next Thursday, and if not, we'll modify our agenda to basically begin to deal with items 3B, basically everything in item 3B. And Denise, I suggest that you and I spend some time together thinking through those and deciding if we think Raftellus attendance at the next meeting would be valuable to us or not. So we'll play on the fly, but we'll have that conversation on Monday a little bit.
Okay, that works for me. Thank you. So if hearing nothing else.
I have one other thing. I have to ask real quickly. Mr. Sabo, yes, I'll be happy to be the contact. If there's a change on that, I will let you know. I just want to just say that you're putting down for next week for your meeting. It's going to be held on March 5th at 4 p.m. You want to go over the financial summary as well as go over the recommendations 5, 8, 11, and 16, which were under 3B. And if there's need to be a change on that because of the time frame on the financials, we will let you know.
Great.
Okay. I just want to make sure I can.
Did we give you enough information, Robert, kind of a highlight without the specific questions to know that you're looking for hardware, firmware engineers and whatever? And we could see could you check to see what availability could be for discussion?
I can start reaching out, Miss Hewitt, but I'd still like to have the questions on the focus because of the questions that you may or may not ask, or the questions that you think you may not ask but not have the right person there will only roadblock it further. So I'd like to still see your questions.
Okay, fair enough.
And Mr. Upton, one thing I cannot emphasize enough, what do you think's going on, and what questions you think we need to be asking? Given once you review the slides and you see the information, we're looking for you to help.
Yes, sir.
Cool.
Mr. Upton, is there any idea the items we asked for? How long is it going to take to get those?
Which items are you talking about? The action items that I have?
Yes.
It'll take me. Some will take me longer than others. I'm hoping that if you're having your meeting next week, I'm hoping to have most of them to you by the end of next week.
Awesome. Thank you.
That would be my goal. But
do we include you, Robert, then for a discussion on what you submit?
You can.
Okay. Nancy, could you add him to the agenda and attendance list, please?
I will. Thank you, Ms. Denise. And it is March 4th. Thank you, Mr. O'Day. on 4 p.m. And while I have it down, both the financial summary include Mr. Upton for questions from the Badger meters, and also the recommendations 5, 8, 11, and 16.
That's correct.
That sounds good. We'll be available to go back and forth on the agenda as well if you need help with that for sure.
Thank you.
Is there anything else? All right. We will be concluding at 6:12. Everyone have a great evening, and John, safe travels to the Northland.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Godspeed, John.
Take care, man.
Thank you, guys.